Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to tonight's review of the 2023 British Grand Prix weekend. Hope you guys firstly enjoyed the weekend and enjoyed what was a very surprising weekend, I think we have to say. Going into the weekend, we knew that, say with McLaren, that we could get something, quite surprising or special happening, but I don't think we thought it was going to be as good as it really was. Obviously, we had Williams looking loads better and really competitive as well. It was such a great weekend. The race, let's be honest, it wasn't that great. It was a bang average race, really. I mean, even after the safety car came in, the racing was decent, but nothing special. So, yeah, wasn't the best British Grand Prix. It was probably the most boring race at Silverstone I can think of since probably 2017. Maybe, 2017. Really going back to the mid part of the last decade. For the last time we had a race that was similar for entertainment level. So, wasn't the greatest race, but there was still some talking points coming out of the race, and of course we're going to get into a couple of those this evening. And the main two talking points we're going to be getting into is McLaren, of course. They're the main topic, as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, and we'll be getting into as well Mercedes-Benz, because I do feel as though because of McLaren's improvement, they have gone under the radar in terms of their improvement and how they have closed the gap to the Red Bull team as well. So yeah, we're going to be focusing on McLaren and Mercedes this evening. Before we do that though, there is a couple things to get into, such as the official results of yesterday's race, and we'll just quickly get into the championship standings. Just want to say though, no matter what time of the world, what time in the world you guys are watching from, no matter where you are in the world, hope you're all having as best a Monday as possible. So yeah, let's get into it, and we'll start. Actually, I've just remembered that there's one thing that I forgot to do. I need to set up a poll in the chat. Let me just quickly do that. I'm just going to quickly post a poll relating to McLaren, and the question will be, can McLaren win a race in 2023? And I will go with what do you call it? Hold on, let me just change the what do you call it? Let me just change the question of the poll. So, how good? Oh, actually, no. Hold on. I've just thought of what question I can put. What are the chances of McLaren winning a race in 2023? So, I'll just quickly do the options, and then we'll get to the beginning of the stream properly. So make sure in that poll to let me know what are the chances of McLaren winning a race in 2023, and the percentage options are 0%, 25%, 50%, and I've gone for 100% as the fourth one. For me, I'd probably put it down as a 50-50 at the minute, because they do have still some new parts coming between now and really the end of the European season. So the McLaren car, theoretically, should be getting quicker. Of course, Mercedes, they'll be making some improvements between now and the end of the European season. Apparently, Red Bull will be bringing an upgrade to the Hungarian Grand Prix, but I don't imagine it'll be that big. Probably just be a small tweak to one of the aero pieces on the car. That's really all they can do. So, I think the chances, as of now, I would say it's a 50-50 in regards to whether they can win a race in 2023. Also, before we get properly into things, I just want to clarify for a couple people in the chat who are saying, not sure if McLaren are back, as Josiah saying McLaren aren't back. Ultimate Thor saying they're not back. Will Chan saying that he's hesitant to say they're back. What I mean by McLaren are back is they're back as a front-running team. And I think really depends on what you personally regard as McLaren being back to what you think is, what they should be. Now, I know some people will think that really you can only say McLaren are back if they're back to having either the fastest car or possibly winning or contending for a world championship. I understand that, but McLaren were always, whether they were contending for a championship or not, they were always in the 80s, most of the 90s, and pretty much all of the 2000s, they were a front-running team and regularly on the podium, and occasionally, even in their seasons where they weren't great, still got a race win or two. If you look at the way the McLaren car is right now, I would say, if you're looking at it purely from an aero perspective, in terms of who has the most grip and who doesn't, I'd say McLaren have got, at the minute, the second best car on the grid. So that's why I say in the thumbnail of this stream, McLaren are back. But again, I understand that people might have different views on what does it mean for, McLaren to be properly back. So yeah, I understand that. But anyway, let's move on. You can let me know, of course, in that poll what you think the chances are of McLaren winning a race in 2023. Let's get on to the result of yesterday's race at Silverstone firstly. So, Max Verstappen won the British Grand Prix by 3.8 seconds from Lando Norris second. Of course, Max was on the soft tyre, Lando was on the hard. Got to say, Lando's pace compared to Max was very impressive through the race yesterday. Was not losing that much time to Max in the first stint, anywhere near as much time, I think, as we expected going into the race. And even in that final 10 laps or so, with Max on what we thought was the better tyre, once Lando got those hard tyres going, Max wasn't really that much quicker than Lando for the last few laps. So, yeah, very impressive pace from McLaren. They definitely weren't as quick as Red Bull, but they definitely were not too far behind them. And then Lewis Hamilton finishing third, claiming his 11th podium in a row at Silverstone. Just an incredible record to be on the podium that many races at Silverstone in a row. I'm not sure if any other driver has a record really similar to it. Maybe they do, but it's got to be quite rare. But yeah, did well Hamilton to be honest, he didn't really do well thinking about it to get third place, because really it was because he was still out on track, had not made his first pit stop, and then the safety car came out, and that allowed him to pit and come out in third place. So, yeah, quite lucky to get the podium, but he did have a good go at second place. But yeah, Lando and McLaren were just too quick for Mercedes yesterday, and really all weekend. Oscar Piastri, shame he finished in P4 because he was so quick this weekend, and I really think deserved a podium, but wasn't to be. But he will be on the podium very soon, quite possibly at the next Grand Prix in Hungary. George Russell finishing in P5, Sergio Perez finishing 6th, with Fernando Alonso 7th. Alonso getting really the best result he could in what was a pretty poor Aston Martin car during the Silverstone weekend, as we'll delve into a bit further with the look at what the race pace was like in the first stint. It was, quite a bad performance they had here at Silverstone, and he finished just ahead of the Williams of Alex Albon, and Albon, with him finishing in 8th, Williams are now 7th in the Constructors' Championship. Brilliant to see. And then completing the points, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, the two Ferraris. Only 3 points they come away with from this race, which is just unbelievable to me, because I thought they would come away with at least, say, I don't know, 12 to 15 points at the very least from this weekend, coming into the weekend. But yeah, the pace wasn't good enough. Of course, they were quicker than Williams and Aston Martin in the race yesterday, but obviously having really the wrong tyres on for the few laps after the safety car came in really did not help them in their ability to try and make progress. And what do you call it? And of course, they pitted with Charles Leclerc really just way too early, and that's what really harmed his race at Silverstone. But yeah, Ferrari definitely quicker than where they ended up finishing, so it's not the absolute end of the world for the Scuderia. But let's see how officially that now affects the championship standings. On the driver's side, Max Verstappen is now 99 points clear of Sergio Perez. And apparently, I haven't seen exactly who said this, and I'm not sure still about the math, but apparently, if Max Verstappen was to finish in second place for every race remaining in 2023, Max would still win the championship. That is how far ahead now he is of Sergio Perez. And given how poor Perez is performing at the minute, and given how awesome Verstappen has been, I think Max has maybe not a decent chance of winning the championship, say in Zandvoort or Monza. I think that would be quite amazing if he was to do that. But I think definitely at either the Singapore or Japanese Grand Prix, I think he could win his third world title there, because he's so far clear, and that gap will probably go up to 120 or 130 points by the time we get to the summer break. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he finally wraps it up. Of course, the F1 Championship has not been wrapped up in a European race since 2004, where Michael Schumacher, of course, wrapped up his 7th world title at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. Fernando Alonso is in third, 19 points behind Perez. Lewis Hamilton a lot closer to third now, only 16 points behind in fourth. And then a big drop off to Carlos Sainz in fifth, only 1 point clear of George Russell in sixth. I've got to say with Russell, good to see him not just having a good weekend, but a consistently good weekend. And really, the only reason that he did not finish ahead of Hamilton was because of the bad luck suffered, with Hamilton getting very fortunate with the timing of the safety car, because Russell in qualifying and clearly in the race was faster than Hamilton. There's no doubt about that. And I think Russell did have an outside chance of a podium if Kevin Magnussen's car never stopped on track to cause a safety car. So a shame for Russell, but still looking a bit better. Charles Leclerc, P7, still waiting to try and creep up past his teammate and into the top 5 of the championship, where really, as a driver, I think he more so deserves to be. Lance Stroll in 8th place, just ahead of Lando Norris, who is now up to P9, and Esteban Ocon down to P10. Oscar Piastri, by the way, is 11th now in the championship after finishing 4th yesterday, of course. And Alexander Albon is up to 13th in the Drivers' Championship. So other position changes there for you guys to know of. And on the Constructors' side, Red Bull are now 208 points clear of Mercedes. Mercedes have got a really nice gap now though, of 22 points between them and Aston Martin in third. And I think Mercedes are, for the moment, until Aston Martin brings, say, a new upgrade that massively, ups their speed, at this point of 2023. Mercedes are looking very good to finish second in the championship. Aston Martin third, 24 points clear of Ferrari in fourth. Not the end of the world for Ferrari. Given Aston Martin's pace at the minute, I think Ferrari still have a pretty decent chance of catching Aston Martin in the next 2-3 races. McLaren now up to P5 and 12 points clear now of Alpine. McLaren should pretty quickly march away from Alpine because McLaren have a car that is miles quicker than the Alpine car. And then you got Williams now up to 7th, level on points with Haas, and Williams only 36 points behind Alpine. And if Williams keep up the pace they've got now, and maybe can bring one final upgrade, which improves their pace by a couple tenths, you never know. Williams might get a bit closer to Alpine yet for the rest of 2023. But yeah, Williams in P7, and then you got Haas in 8th, Alfa Romeo in P9 and AlphaTauri in P10. And I think, guys, after not just this weekend's race we've just had, but the Austrian Grand Prix as well, I think we can be pretty confident that Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri are going to finish in the last two positions of the championship. Because AlphaTauri's car is mediocre and Alfa Romeo's car is only really good at very particular tracks. And those only seem for Alfa Romeo to come around once every, 4 to 5 races. So, yeah, the chances of Alfa Romeo climbing up from 9th are not that good. AlphaTauri, I'm very confident, will not move from the foot of the championship. So, yeah, those are the championship standings. As we've got now just 2 races to go until the summer break. And, yeah, the pecking order, of course, has changed around quite a bit. And I think we'll just get straight into things. And we will crack on with talking about the most improved team of 2023. And that is, of course, the McLaren Formula One team. What an improvement they have made in this last couple weeks or so. They were quite firmly stuck in a rut in the first few races of the season. Wasn't looking positive. They were really struggling to not just match Alpine, but were struggling to really get near them a lot of the time. And it was looking like this was going to be a very difficult 2023 Formula One season, unless upgrades improved their situation. Just to illustrate just how far off they were before that upgrade, obviously, that was brought in Austria, which is mostly the reason why they have made such improvement. Let's go and look at what their race pace was like compared to the rest of the field in Canada, which was the final race before that massive upgrade to the side pod and floor at the Red Bull Ring. Now, this average pace is in between the laps of 18 and 35 at the Canadian Grand Prix. And the reason I've done it in between lap 18 and 35 is because on lap 18, the race got going again after a safety car period of a few laps. And on lap 35, Lando Norris made, I think, his second pit stop. So that's why I'm looking between this area of the race, because most of the teams were on the same compound and had the same amount of laps done on that compound. So it was very good to see just who had, better race pace than others. And you can see Max Verstappen in the Red Bull was quickest on a 1:16.8 on average. Couple tenths quicker than Aston Martin, 4 tenths better than Mercedes, half a second better than Ferrari. Ferrari, though, were on the mediums in that part of the race that they started the Grand Prix on. So it just shows again how impressive their pace was in Canada. If only they started higher. And then a massive drop-off, not to McLaren, but to Alpine, 1.2 seconds per lap slower than Red Bull. Then Alfa Romeo, just a tenth slower than Alpine. And again, remember, Bottas was also, during this part of the race, was still on the tyres. I think the hard compound tyres that he started the race with. So, despite Lando in the McLaren having a tyre advantage in terms of, I think it was 12 12 or 13 lap fresher tyres, and they were the same hard compound tyres, was still, on average, a tenth of a second slower per lap. And around what is a pretty short racetrack was 1.5 seconds per lap slower than the Red Bull Max Verstappen, just to illustrate how slow they were just a couple weeks before this big upgrade. They were barely quicker than the Williams. They were a bit quicker than AlphaTauri and Haas, but yeah, they were very slow. I mean, even, when you compare them to Aston Martin, Mercedes and Ferrari, they were 1 to 1.2 seconds slower than those teams relatively. So it was a massive gap between them and the front-running teams at that point of the season. They were not a team that was at the front of the midfield pack by any means, but they knew that if this upgrade worked for them, the pace would improve. But I'm not sure they thought it improved their pace as much as it did, as we'll see the data in a few moments' time. But let's get on to the actual upgrade itself. So here is the biggest upgrade, which has helped McLaren's performance. So here on the bottom is the old side pod design. This is what they start the season with. And the way it goes down towards the floor is not as straight as what you'll see on the top here, which is the new floor or side pod design that McLaren have gone for. Obviously, credit to Albert Fabrega for taking these photos and doing these comparison pictures. But you can see the way the side pod drops off, it's very much like the Aston Martin side pod. And that is what McLaren decided to essentially copy, not in a way that's illegal, of course, but essentially copy to try and improve their pace. And it did massively because, of course, when they, redesigned the floor and the side pod, the floor and the side pod with these 2023 cars and these regulations are the two most important parts of these cars. The floor, the most important, of course, because obviously these cars are ground effect cars. But with the way the side pod interacts with the floor, it is absolutely crucial to the performance of the car. And clearly, as we saw in Austria, it worked massively. As in qualifying at the Austrian Grand Prix, Lando Norris qualified not only in 4th place, but ahead of both Mercedes, both Aston Martins, and was only a quarter of a second slower than the Red Bull. But we do have to remember that despite him obviously going on to finish in 4th in the race, was benefited, of course, by a penalty for Carlos Sainz with him finishing in P4. The pace, obviously, in the race was good, but of course, Austria, very short track, so it can seem better for a maybe midfield team, let's say, around a short track like that in terms of the gap between them and the team at the very front of the field, which is totally understandable. But clearly there was progress, but it wasn't really until the British Grand Prix until we were going to see what the real progress of all these upgrades were. And that wasn't the end, by the way, of the upgrades. As here is a new upgrade they brought for Silverstone, which, by the way, was only on Lando Norris's car at Silverstone. Piastri did have the side pod and floor upgrade for Silverstone. That's why he was a lot quicker than he was in Austria. But Lando still having the majority of new parts on his car. So here on the bottom is the old front wing. And you can see here with the hands pointing to certain areas, the slight differences to the front wing design. Again, it is only slight differences, but it was a new front wing for McLaren, and you can see over here as well by the nose cone area. Again, slight differences, but clearly that coupled with the side pod and floor upgrade around a circuit that, even though is high speed, has a lot of very important corners that can clearly show off a massive improvement of aerodynamic grip through upgrades. We saw at Silverstone clear evidence that McLaren had improved massively to the point where they were quite clearly and are now, as of now, a front-running Formula One team. Because, of course, in qualifying, not only did they get second and third on the grid on pure pace, I would say. Maybe you could say Charles Leclerc could have gone quicker and got third, but McLaren were the quicker team in qualifying compared to Ferrari, out-qualifying both Ferraris, both Mercedes. They were miles ahead of Aston Martin, as you can see. 0.7 of a second quicker than Aston Martin when they were so slow compared to them back in Canada, and were only, once again, 1/4 of a second slower than Red Bull around a track that is, well, 22, 23 seconds longer compared to the Red Bull ring. So an incredibly impressive qualifying performance and pacing qualifying. But maybe at that point you would say, well, we've seen this before with McLaren, stunning qualifying pace, but then, they didn't have the ability necessarily to carry that through until or into the race itself. But yesterday, quite clearly, they could. As you can see here, this is the average pace of all the teams between lap 2 and 17. The reason I've done it between these laps is because on lap 18, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari made a pit stop for the hard tyres. So, of course, during that part of the race, everyone would have been on the same amount of tyre life. Not everyone was on the same compound. You had Russell there in the Mercedes on the soft. Tsunoda was on the soft. I think Zhou and Magnussen were on the medium. I'm not sure exactly with those teams. But yeah, this part of the race is really the best part of the race to see just who had the best and worst race pace. And Red Bull were quicker, definitely, than McLaren. But compared to Austria, it was a lot better for McLaren because they were only, on average, 1/3 of a second slower per lap compared to the Red Bull team. So really, the amount of time they were losing during the race compared to Red Bull was about what they were losing in qualifying. When in Austria, again, Lando was 1/4 of a second down, but then in the race, Lando was quite a bit slower and McLaren were quite a bit slower than the Red Bull. I think the gap was more like 0.7 of a second per lap between Red Bull and McLaren at the Red Bull ring. So a massive improvement there. And McLaren were not only the second quickest team yesterday, they were comfortably quicker than Ferrari and Mercedes. A couple tenths of a second per lap quicker than Ferrari. Mercedes of Russell, even though he was held up by Charles Leclerc, I don't think even in clear air he would have done a much better pace than he was doing, because he was still benefiting behind Leclerc from, having DRS, which of course really does improve your lap times. And when Russell was actually in clear air for a few laps, he wasn't gaining really at all on the two McLarens. So McLaren were quite clearly quicker than Ferrari and Mercedes. And you can see, compared to Alpine and Aston Martin, not just quicker by an absolute country mile. 0.7 of a second per lap, the advantage they had. And yeah, just a massive improvement. Of course, they ended up finishing in P2 and P4, as you can see here. Should have been second and third, because Norris and Piastri, up until that safety car, were comfortable in second and third place. Never really had anyone to worry about behind them. Charles Leclerc was really struggling with his car. Russell, even in clear air, couldn't close the gap. And really, McLaren's race until the safety car was just them making sure they secured a double podium, which of course they couldn't secure because Piastri got very unlucky with the timing of the safety car. But when going back to this very key piece of data, it is absolutely clear to see that McLaren right now, and this won't be the case around every racetrack because there will definitely be tracks like Monza, Spa that won't suit them as well probably as Silverstone or the next track we're going to, the Hungaroring. But in terms of pure grip, McLaren have the second best car right now in Formula 1. And what makes as well their average pace from this early part of the race, really the first stint of the race, and even from qualifying so impressive, is of course Silverstone, plenty of corners, but it is quite a high-speed track as well, and McLaren do have about a 5 to 6 kilometer an hour difference between them and Red Bull at top speed in Red Bull's favour, of course. So if you were to eliminate that speed difference, there's a very good chance that McLaren, let's say they had the exact same straight line speed as Red Bull, there's a very good chance that, let's say, in qualifying, if I could go back to those results, there you go. Yeah, there's a very good chance that that quarter of a second gap would be maybe not entirely wiped out, but it would be a lot closer between Red Bull and McLaren, which again makes McLaren's pace so impressive. And of course, McLaren's upgrades don't finish there, because they are bringing some new parts to the Hungarian Grand Prix, we believe. I have seen some comments from Andrea Stella suggesting they might try and spread out all of the new parts that they still have remaining to come and be put onto the car. They might spread them out over the last few European races so they can, drip feed the upgrades and, don't have to have a mad rush necessarily to get all the parts on the car as soon as possible. Because, of course, they do want to start focusing on next year. I believe their wind tunnel is now operational, and next year's car really will be the first McLaren to be helped, designed, I guess you could call it, by the new McLaren wind tunnel, which definitely should improve McLaren's chances going forward. So that's why I say McLaren are back, because they have, in my view, right now, the second best car, second best package on the grid. And if those upgrades, whether they all come at the Hungarian Grand Prix or they're spread out over the last 4 European races, I think McLaren have definitely a decent chance of winning a race in 2023. And if Red Bull do not win a race, if Red Bull fail to win every race this season, which, I mean, we have to be fair, the chances of Red Bull winning every race are still, that's still a very steep mountain for Red Bull to climb, because, of course, that feat has never been done before. If they're not to win a race this season, and let's say that next or the first race of 2023 they don't win is the next race in Hungary, I think McLaren are the best team placed to take advantage of that and get the first win for any team outside of Red Bull. So that's why, again, I say McLaren are back. And let me know in that poll at the top of the live chat, do you think McLaren obviously can win a race? Let me know that in the chat. But what are the chances of McLaren, in your view, winning a race in 2023? Let me know in that poll, and I will, of course, read out the results at the end of the stream. But before we move on to Mercedes-Benz, I just want to quickly touch on something, which is, don't forget, guys, my next 2 pieces of content on the channel will be the beginning, really, of my coverage of the Hungarian Grand Prix. And the next piece of content on the channel after tonight will be on Thursday night in 10 days' time, live at 8 p.m. UK time on the 20th of July for the weekend preview of the 2023 Hungarian Grand Prix. And we should know some news about then as to who, is bringing what for that Hungarian Grand Prix. And then, of course, a night later, live again, 8 p.m. UK time on the Friday night, I'll be doing a qualifying preview for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And essentially, my schedule for content for the Hungarian Grand Prix will be the same as it was for Silverstone. The only difference being the race on Sunday starts an hour earlier in the UK than it did yesterday, and I will not be doing a stream the day after the race because, of course, a week after the Hungarian Grand Prix, it is the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. So, yeah, that's the plan for Hungary. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Because, of course, we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix and covered every Grand Prix in immense detail. So if you want to keep up to date with how things are going in Formula 1, make sure to subscribe. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. We're currently on 14 likes. Try and get up to 20 plus if we can in the next few minutes. But let's read out... actually, hold on. I'll just hold off on reading your comments, rather, because I just want to touch on Mercedes now, because I just want to quickly get into them. Because, again, they have made improvements which have gone a bit under the radar after the British Grand Prix weekend, because of how spectacular, of course, McLaren have been. So, let's go on to Mercedes-Benz now. And yeah, we knew there was an upgrade or upgrades coming for the British Grand Prix. It wasn't as many upgrades as I hoped and as I expected, but it was still significant and quite a different upgrade to what they previously had. Here it is, the new Mercedes front wing. So you can see here with the hands that Albert Fabrega has put, the differences in design on the wing elements of the front wing. This is, of course, on the top here, the new Mercedes front wing. And then I'll just scroll down so you can see the old Mercedes front wing. So you can see in those areas where the hands were pointing, again, the difference in design. And clearly, once we properly got into qualifying and the race, Mercedes' pace, compared to Red Bull, did improve. As if we go back to those qualifying results, around a longer track, for them to be 4.5 tenths off Red Bull is very good. Again, McLaren, obviously, their improvement makes that look worse, because McLaren were 0.2 of a second quicker in qualifying than Mercedes were. But, you know, when you look at the last time we went to a long racetrack, which was, I think, Miami, which is around about similar length, I believe, Mercedes were miles off Red Bull. They were very close, if not about a second a lap slower in qualifying, and in the race were, about that far off, maybe just under that, maybe 0.8 tenths of a second per lap off. So, yeah, they have made massive improvements to this car since then, of course. New side pod, new floor, new suspension. Now a new front wing, so basically a new car since that Miami Grand Prix. And you can just see the improvements they've made. They've really slashed the gap in half since the start of May, which is, to be honest, I would say they're ahead of schedule for, because we knew they would close the gap down to Red Bull as the season went on. I think most of us definitely knew that was going to happen, but I didn't think they would be only half a second away in qualifying around a bit of a longer racetrack. I thought they'd be still a bit too far behind, really, to be fighting with Ferrari and to be, only this far away from pole position. And then again, when we look at the race pace, let's say Russell was not held up by Leclerc, he would have been around half a second per lap slower than Max in the Red Bull, which again is impressive, because at the start of the season, around those longer racetracks like Bahrain, Miami, Saudi Arabia, it was a lot closer to Mercedes being a second a lap slower, and even at the very start of the season, it was, I think at times, 1.5 seconds a lap, the gap between Red Bull and Mercedes. So for them to have made that gain, so let's say since the Bahrain Grand Prix, for them to have made that type of gain from the start of March to now, that's 4 months for them to have took out a second, let's say, from Red Bull, when it comes to race pace, and say 3/4 of a second when it comes to qualifying pace. That's very impressive. And I think if you're a Mercedes fan, you should be very encouraged by this, at least for the rest of this season. Of course, we know Mercedes will definitely have an eye on next year's car, but they will be bringing some more upgrades this season. We do believe their next and real final big upgrade of the year will be at the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, which is the first race after the summer break. And a lot of teams, by the way, will be bringing their final big upgrade there because, obviously, with the way the budget cap works, the teams can't really develop into, September, October, November for this year. So, yeah, that Dutch Grand Prix will be massive for new upgrades. And let's hope we see Aston Martin and Alpine especially massively upgrade their car between now and that, we'll say, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, because Alpine were a bit quicker in the race than I expected. They were just a tad quicker during that part of the race than Aston Martin. But Aston Martin, yeah, their pace at the minute, horrendous. Half a second a lap slower than Ferrari and Mercedes. I mean, you saw when Hamilton passed Alonso, that Mercedes looked so much quicker. And then compared to McLaren, 0.7 of a second per lap slower. When in Canada, as we saw, if I can get it back up, yeah, they were over a second a lap quicker than the McLaren team. So it just shows you how bad Aston Martin have really got in the last, say, 3-4 weeks. And I know Silverstone wouldn't have suited their car as much as, other tracks on the calendar, like Monaco, for example, where they were very strong and were really best of the rest after Red Bull. But they have really fallen off, and really, for Aston Martin, of course, that is because they just are not keeping up with the rate of development with other teams like Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes. But yeah, if you're a Mercedes fan, I think you should be really, I really think you should be positive about your pace, because again, it's so much better than it was at the start of the year, a lot better than it was even a couple months ago. So yeah, you should definitely be positive, and if they can just make sure that final big upgrade works again like the others have and pulls them, 2-3 of a second closer, then I think Mercedes have got a pretty decent chance at not only winning a race in 2023, but possibly at certain tracks being quicker on pure performance than the Red Bull team. So, yeah, that's all really Mercedes need. It's just for that one final upgrade to work as much as it needs to for them, which is, to pull them, say, a third of a second closer, and we could absolutely see Mercedes, and if McLaren, if their remaining upgrades work as well, we could really see Mercedes and McLaren fighting very hard with Red Bull in the second half of this year. But I will say, coming away from this British Grand Prix, this is, of course, race 10 of the season we're now done with. The Hungarian Grand Prix will be the halfway point of the 2023 Formula 1 season. And at the minute, the pecking order, in my view, in Formula 1 right now is Red Bull quickest, McLaren second. When it comes to race pace, Mercedes third, but I think Ferrari are still quicker than Mercedes over a qualifying lap. So very close between those two. Ferrari, not the end of the world for them either. They've still definitely got some upgrades in the pipeline. And then Aston Martin, you'd probably have to say around fifth quickest right now. And then, with Williams, we don't know whether this pace they had at Silverstone is legitimate pace they can carry through to every track. I really hope it is, but we'll have to see in Hungary. But Aston Martin, you have to say right now, a fifth. With probably Alpine 6th, Williams 7th, Haas 8th, Alfa Romeo 9th, and AlphaTauri in 10th. That's how it looks going into the final two races before the summer break. Of course, if there's a few upgrades in Hungary, that could easily change around again. It really does change around just that easily. And one point I do want to make is these regulations clearly are working. Just look at the improvements McLaren have made just this season, never mind looking back to how they were last year. Look how, the improvements at Williams. A year and a half ago, Williams were by far the slowest team. Now they're one of the best teams in the midfield. Alpine, of course, they've gained a bit. Aston Martin have gained a lot. So, yeah, these regulations are definitely working. And when you look back to the very start of the season in Bahrain, obviously I've just read out what I think the pecking order is right now. Back in Bahrain, it was what? Red Bull, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Mercedes, Alpine, and then probably Haas, Williams, and then McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, something like that. So you can just see how, again, it's changed around massively. Aston Martin, obviously, for most of the, say, first 6 races were the second best team. Now they're very close, really, if not at the minute, you'd have to say probably a midfield team with how they've dropped off. Alpine, I mean, they're now in the position they were in at the start of the year, but they just haven't kept up, again, with the rate of development, which is why they've gone backwards since their podium at Monaco. Williams have improved massively, and maybe they'll be fighting with Alpine for the rest of the year. McLaren, of course, had one of the worst cars on the grid at the start of the season, and now one of the best on the grid. So, yeah, these regulations working absolutely brilliantly, and I cannot wait to see just how the second half of the season goes with, McLaren now in there, Aston Martin, if they can get back in there, that would be great. And if Williams can, use their extra wind tunnel time to their advantage, then we could see Williams end the season very quickly. Remember, on June the 30th, Williams were 9th in the championship. So they will have the second most wind tunnel time out of any team in the second half of this season. So, I mean, they will want to a degree, focus on 2024. But if they really want to get some great results between now and the end of the season, then if they can, they should really go flat out on development until the end of the year, I think. Because if they do, they could be very quick towards the end of this season. They really could. And they could be regular point scorers at the end of this season if they really get it right with some more development. But yeah, that's really all for this stream that I wanted to talk about. So let's now get into your comments in the chat, because I can see you guys have plenty to say. I can see we're on 16 likes. Let's try and get up to 20 if we can at the end of the stream. So if you've not hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. Right. Let me just go through your comments. Ultimate Thought says, McLaren are not back. Definitely not. Wait and see in Hungary, then Spa. Mercedes are fully working on their 2024 car. I don't think you're correct on that. I don't believe that. I think Mercedes are still, they've got an eye on this season, because positive developments for this year will help their understanding for next year. So I don't think that's the case, that Mercedes are fully working on next year's car. And then you finish up the comment with, McLaren are still way behind Red Bull. They could be above Ferrari, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. No disrespect with what I'm about to say, but I'm not sure if exactly what you were watching at Silverstone, because they're not maybe quicker than Ferrari. They are quicker than Ferrari. It's that simple. Again, that's not going to be the case at every track. At the power tracks, Ferrari definitely will be a lot closer to McLaren, and in qualifying probably quicker. But around these tracks that have got obviously more corners and are more aero important, I think McLaren are definitely the better team. And I don't think they're too far away from Red Bull. I know people may say, well, in the race, Max wasn't pushing that hard. I disagree. Because Max would have wanted, and Red Bull would have wanted him to build really a good gap to McLaren and the rest so they could have a comfortable rest of the race. And he wasn't really... he wasn't really that easy for him to do that. And he actually said after the race he was very pleasantly surprised by how quick McLaren were compared to them. Will Chan says, oof, hesitant to declare that McLaren are back, see what happens in Hungary first. Yeah, I understand why you may say that, but I am pretty confident that in Hungary there'll be, what do you call it? I'm pretty confident that, what do you call it? That, sorry, I just saw something very weird on Twitter. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that McLaren will be, at worst, the second best team, if not very close, maybe on the same pace as Red Bull in qualifying. Josiah says McLaren aren't back. Every team has been back within the past month. Yeah, I mean, well, Aston Martin, they haven't really done anything in the last few years, so you can't be back, really. Never been that great in the first place. Same really with Alpine. I know what you mean, though, by, certain teams, other teams have been really good, a few races ago, now dropped off. I don't think that's going to happen as much to McLaren because I think their upgrade was that big and has improved their car that much that it's going to take something quite special from the other teams to put McLaren back in the midfield. That would be quite something. Tarun saying I'm a McLaren fan, but it's just one race, so we need to calm down. I understand that, but, in Austria, we saw great pace as well, especially compared to Mercedes and Aston Martin. We saw it here as well. And I don't think this is just going to be exclusive to one racetrack. And I think you guys are going to be very... I understand why some of you being cautious, absolutely, but I think some of you might be being a bit too cautious because I think this pace is absolutely genuine. I don't think we're going to come to Hungary and McLaren are not that quick. I just don't see that happening. So, yeah. But I can understand the caution because, obviously a few races ago Alpine were very quick, but I think this is a bit different with McLaren. I think their car will... in terms of being good, will last a bit longer than Alpine. Greg Martinez says Hamilton needs Shakira at every Grand Prix. Josiah saying, interesting question for the chat. Who do you think finishes second in the championship? Yeah, obviously you guys can, answer that if you want. For me, I can't really say at the minute because it's still too hard to say because really I need to see where we are when we get to the summer break because I do expect there to be maybe a couple further updates to maybe a couple teams between now and the summer break, and that should change our opinion of, who's looking good and who isn't for the second half of the season. I think actually you mean the driver's side, don't you? Yeah, the drivers' championship. I think you might actually mean. You didn't. To be fair, you didn't actually clarify, but maybe you didn't have to. I think on the driver's side, I still think Sergio Perez because I still think the Red Bull will be quick enough for him to get, or not get it, but for him to maintain it. Benjamino says Lando could catch Charles, George, and Carlos in the championship before the end of the season. Yeah, absolutely he could. I mean, he's only 30 points behind Leclerc. He could be ahead of Leclerc by the time we get to Monza. I mean, it's definitely possible. If as long as McLaren can show this pace for the next few races at least, it's definitely possible. Josiah says, I reckon Hamilton will finish P2, but it will be a very tight margin between second and fourth. Will Chan says, when is Aston Martin's upgrades going to actually help them? If you're talking about the upgrades they brought in Canada, obviously helped them there, but other teams have improved since then, and that's why we're now, that's why we're now got Aston Martin where they are now. Yeah, so we'll see. I do get the feeling that we might get something from Aston Martin upgrade-wise before the summer break comes. So, yeah, watch this space with them. And let's hope, from their perspective, it's a big upgrade, because they need to get back into that fight. Alonso, though, after the race, did not sound that bothered, so maybe he knows something we don't. Sparky Pete says Max keeps saying over and over he's not pushing the car to the limit. Everyone else is. A huge gap in front, bigger than we know. Is everyone else pushing their car to the limit? I don't think they are. Everyone is managing their car to a certain extent. Not everyone is just doing qualifying lap type of driving. You only do that really if it's like the last few laps of a race and you're on fresh tyres and stuff like that. Yeah, for most of a Grand Prix, you're just looking after the tyres and just trying to manage the car in the best way you can and the quickest way you can. Yeah, I don't think Max was significantly driving, a lot far away or further away from the limit of the car than Lando was with his McLaren. I think they were pretty much pushing as hard as each other. I don't think there was really a difference there. Just saw a comment there that I just want to try and find. Milton Warren Jr. says, I need to see them with one more race before I commit, but I think 50%. Yeah, for me at the minute, it's a 50-50, but Hungary will give us, I think, the full picture, because Silverstone, again, a lot of important corners, but it is a high-speed track. You do have to have, if you want to be the best team at Silverstone, you have to have, great straight line speed and a great aerodynamic package. McLaren have a very, very good aerodynamic package, but they don't have enough top speed to be as good as Red Bull and Ferrari. There's still a few kilometers an hour lacking in that area. But in Hungary, straight line speed doesn't matter at all. So it'll all be about downforce in Hungary, and we'll get to find out properly at this point of the season who has the most downforce and who doesn't, which will be fun. Let's find some other comments here if I can. Sparky Pete says, Max pushed the lead to 9 seconds before the safety car. Max still said he doesn't push the limit. I believe even yesterday said it. But again, again, you're not quite seeing the point I'm making. Is, yeah, Max was not pushing to the limit, but was he pushing a lot less than the other drivers? That's what I'm trying to say. And I don't think Max was pushing significantly less than Lando was. So, yeah, that's why I think that McLaren, I mean, they're definitely slower than Red Bull right now. I'm not trying to sit here and say that McLaren are as quick as Red Bull. They're not. But they're not that far away. They're definitely not that far away. I mean, we saw it qualifying. Only a quarter of a second difference between Max and Lando, with both McLarens up there in the top three. And as well, with Max pushing the lead to 9 seconds, I can't remember exactly if he did or not. I can't remember what the lead was at that point. But when the safety car came out, it was lap... What was it? Like lap 30... Around lap 30-ish. So for Lando to only lose 9 seconds in about 30 laps is quite good. That's that's nothing. That's not terrible by any means. That's about right for what the average pace difference was between Red Bull and McLaren in the first stint of the race until Charles Leclerc, the first man out the front runners, made his pit stop. So, yeah, that's not terrible by any means. I can see a few comments about Lance Stroll. Dustin Salanaz saying in his defense, Stroll would beat me in Forza. Yes, Stroll is having an absolutely terrible time at the minute. And I might be doing a piece on him soon. Not sure if it's going to be a stream or a video, but I think I might be doing a certain content piece on him soon. Because I think a conversation needs to be had about Lance Stroll. A serious conversation. Not just about this year, but just long term. And at some point, probably sooner rather than later. Not sure how soon, but yeah, sooner rather than later, I think we're going to have that conversation on this channel in regards to Lance Stroll. But I think, guys, I'll bring the stream to a close. Let me just finish up the poll in the chat, where, of course, I asked you guys, what are the chances of McLaren winning a race in 2023? And you guys went with 25% their chance, which, again, I don't blame you guys for going for, because obviously the more races we get, the more provable data we'll have to suggest whether McLaren have got a good enough car to do that. Yeah, we'll see in Hungary whether they legitimately do have a car that could even snatch one race win in this season. 0% was the second most popular option there. And then 50% third, 100% last. Not surprised that 100% was last, because I definitely don't believe it's a guarantee that McLaren are going to win a race in 2023. Again, reminder of what the next two pieces of content on the channel are. So I will be gone for about 10 days, guys, but my next content will be Thursday, the 20th of July, live at 8 PM UK time for the 2023 Hungarian Grand Prix weekend preview. And then exactly one day later, live again, obviously at 8 PM, I'll be doing the qualifying preview for the 2023 Hungarian Grand Prix. And then on the Saturday, it will be Practice 3, F2 Sprint Race and qualifying watch-along from, 11:15 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon. I think that's what it will be, just like Silverstone. And then for the race day, I'll be live at 12 PM UK time, 2 hours before the race, for the race build-up, race watch-along, and race reactions. So, yeah, cannot wait for the Hungarian Grand Prix, and we've had plenty of very interesting and unusual races in Hungary. Maybe we'll get another one. But thank you guys for coming along for tonight's stream, and thank you as well for coming along to so much of the content this weekend. It's been great to have you along, and yeah, cannot wait to see you guys again in Hungary. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for all of the latest content to do, obviously, with Formula 1 in 2023, and for the next Grand Prix, make sure to also smash the notifications bell so you're notified as to when I go live and upload videos. And as well, before you go, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to smash that like button. And if you want to keep up with the content, another good place you could go to follow me is by following me on Twitter at ChazHD5 is my handle. I believe that's what you call it, or my actual handle. I'm not sure what handle means exactly. Is ChazHD on Twitter, but again, the @is ChazHD5. And then for my Discord server, yeah, there's a link below in the description. That's another great place to keep up to date with my content. And, of course, we have over 500 members there. So if you want to be part of our growing community, then make sure to join the server. But thank you guys for the British Grand Prix weekend. And until race 11 on the calendar, the Hungarian Grand Prix, the Hungaroring in Budapest, and my preview for that weekend's race in 10 days from now, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.